Want to talk about this quad here today. About a month ago, I built the whole thing totally, and some things weren't correct on it, and I ended up having some trouble with it and fried the flight controller and the VTX and a couple other things. And I want to show you what I did differently. Um, Now, here's the flight controller. It's the same one as this one. And if you notice, on this flight controller here, it has a capacitor here and another capacitor up here. You can see I tried to solder on it to, put it back on. And the reason it fell off is because I was tightening down a nut and I hit these two and they fell off, and the flight controller wasn't working after that. So, well, if you also notice, uh, instead of a ribbon cable, these older ones have pins in them. You can see the pins in the ESC and slots right there in the flight board. And you put those two together and so they could talk. But anyway, the stack here, this time what I did is I have standoffs that are nylon, and so are those nuts. They're nylon nuts. And the reason for that is, like, if you notice on most flight controllers in ESC, they have these gummies that fit right in there, you know. Well, this one didn't have any gummies in it, and the holes were too small to even get gummies to put in there. So when I did it on my first quad, I had metal screws going up for the standoffs, and it shorted something out. I don't know if my VTX shorted something out, but the frame had a short in it, and every time I would put the top back on it, I would get a spark because the very edge of the SMA connector antenna must have been touching some part of the frame, because I would see a little spark on that. And so that's why I went with the nylon nuts and standoffs on the ESC and flight controller this time. And it's buttoned down real tight. Now the VTX, there's two VTXs I have here, which is basically the same thing I have, hiding way down there. But they're these cheap ones like this, and I had one that just totally is hard to repair and put the parts back on. I'm gonna try to solder this MMCX connector onto here, and that's a little mess back here, but I'll see if I could get that to work. If not, I got a plan B anyway. So the antenna, I went ahead and tied it down real tight with a bunch of zip ties, and the VTX is right there, right here under the wires there. And I put some double-sided sticky tape on the bottom of this. I also, this time, over the SMA connector, I put some shrink wrap over it, so if it does end up touching the frame, it's not gonna, ground anything out. Because I didn't know it at the time, but the SMA connector can ground out. I didn't even know there was any kind of power going through it, you know. So, but anyway, um, this receiver, I know it's like these two receivers here, and they look like they go on an airplane, which they can, and they could go on a quad too. The reason why I'm using these receivers is because I have them, and I have two radios, which they use these kind of radios, Radio Link, and the receivers for them is the Radio Link R9DS. So, might as well put them to use. What the heck? They're just sitting there collecting dust. So I'll put them on a modern frame. That's what I thought. And that's about it on this build. But anyway, I tested it out, and it flies good. And I've already updated the firmware to Betaflight 4.3. I don't want to use 4.4 yet. But it was no problem on the defaults, on the PIDs on the defaults, and the filters were just fine. Unlike some other quads I'll talk about later. But that's it on this one. See you later.